everybody, my name is Stephanie Carroll. I am a writer of historical women's fiction and author of A White Room and The Binding of St. Barbara, two unpublished novels which I'm currently in the process of finding an agent and publisher for. Today I'm going to be giving a review of the book The Fine Print of Self-Publishing. Ironic that I'm reading this book, isn't it? Currently searching, I guess I should rephrase that, I am an author currently searching for an agent and publisher but considering self-publishing. This is a really awesome book. It's the 4th edition and it is by Mark Levine. That's how to spell it if you're interested. And basically what it is, it's a book that talks to you about choosing a self-publisher. And I really like this book because it focuses on POD publishing, which is called print on demand. It's the new rage for self-publishing. It's the self-publishing thing that it has everybody talking and everybody's saying there's a self-publishing revolution going on right now. POD publishing is that reason. For people who don't know what POD publishing is, it is print on demand. So rather than paying a printer to print like 5,000 copies of your book, even though you don't know you're going to sell them, what POD companies do is they create the template to print your book, but they don't actually print it until somebody orders it. So usually these companies are connected to Amazon or the Barnes & Noble bookstore, and people can go there and order the book, and instead of you having to fulfill that order with books that you ordered in advance, the POD company will print it and then mail it off. So you don't have to pay for any merchandise that isn't already sold. Now, POD publishing is really, really great for, they usually also do ebooks, but POD publishing is really awesome for people who aren't 100% sure if they're going to sell a bunch, and for people who kind of want to maybe test the waters, get started. The cons of POD publishing is that sometimes, not all, but sometimes the quality will be less than offset printing. It's a different type of printing. POD uses digital printing. Offset uses the traditional like plates and stamping and stuff. So it's going to be a little bit lower quality, but half the time it's not such a big thing that people are going to notice or care. It's not like it's really bad. But some companies are, so you have to do your research. The other con with POD publishing is that some of the companies are really vanity presses that are pretending to be POD publishers. A vanity press is a place that makes you feel like you have been accepted to an elite publishing club, but really they take all your rights and they take all your money. Those are two things that you don't want. You want to avoid that. Because if they take your rights to your work, you can't take it anywhere else. You can't sell it to a publisher. But POD companies, you keep your rights and you can later sell it or print it somewhere else. Okay? So the other con is, so the cons are slightly lower quality depending on the company. If you get a bad company, it's going to be really crappy. Okay? 2 is possible vanity presses pretending to be POD publishers, and the POD publishers do take a percentage. They take a percentage based on their printing cost. A normal publisher does this too. It's not really different. And in a way, a lot of people can make more money because they are, cutting out certain middlemen, like the percentage you'd give to an agent, percentage you would give to a bunch of people in the process. This way you're just giving a percentage to the publisher, the printer. But, however, the other con is that POD publishing is technically more expensive for you for large quantities of books. So if you were to sell 5,000 books one at a time through POD publishing, you would make less money than if you ordered 5,000 books up front from an offset. It's kind of like buying in bulk. Buying in bulk is cheaper. It's that simple. But buying in bulk also means that you are responsible for selling those. If they don't sell, you can't send them back. They just sit in your garage and make you feel miserable. Also, when you get offset and you get all your books in bulk, You're the person that has to fulfill orders. You're the person who has to keep track of everything, and you're the person who has to protect the books. If you try to store your books in your garage, and believe it or not, 5,000 books, that's a lot of books. That's going to take up space, so you also have to have the space for it. But if you're trying to store them in your garage and your garage floods, guess what's going to happen to that merchandise? You're not going to be able to sell it, not at full price, if it gets wet. So these are things to consider when you're thinking about going offset or POD. The reason people usually choose offset is they know they're going to sell a whole bunch of books. Maybe they have pre-orders or something, and or they want to have high quality stuff, especially for picture books, photo books, things like that. But this book specifically is talking about POD publishers. Because once you get out there, you want to find a good POD publisher, one that's not going to steal all your money, and one that's going to give you your rights, and one that is not a vanity press, and one that is easy to use and author friendly and can help you make sure you get a good book. A lot of these POD places talk about kind of having like this all-inclusive package that gives you everything. It gives you copy editing, it gives you marketing tools, it gives you template and cover creation. But sometimes those things have little like, cons. It sounds all good when they say it like that. We just do everything. But it doesn't explain that it might be lower quality stuff. It might be a template cover, which means they might be using images and designs that will be used for other covers. Or it just might be a crappy cover. And the copy editing, you don't know if it's going to be good or bad. What if they have a crappy copy editor? Things like this are things you need to think about. Now, when using a POD company, you don't have to use all their stuff. But some companies, the packages, like the lowest package includes all that stuff. So if you didn't want to use it, you'd still have to pay for it. But not all companies are like that. Other companies just allow you to provide everything. You provide the cover design, you provide the template, and they just publish it. So that's something that you need to consider, and those things, it's hard to compare them. I tried comparing them before I got this book by going to the different websites of the POD companies, and it was hard. It was hard trying to find all the information I was looking for, and it was hard after I found it, doing a side-by-side comparison. This book does that for you. So what Mark Levine does in this book, I'll read you the table of contents. The first 7 chapters are focused on telling you how to break down self-publishing by using POD and other forms. So chapter 1 is the basics of self-publishing. Chapter 2 is choosing a self-publishing route. So that's going to be helping you figure out whether or not you want to do POD or offset. Self-publishing essentials is chapter 3, stuff you need to read over and over. Chapter 4, why you need to read this book. I don't like the sound of that chapter. I'm not sure what it's about. Let me see. No, I'm not going to read it. Chapter 5 is the 9 qualities of a good self-publishing company. So it's telling you what you want to look for. Chapter 6, the fine print of publishing contracts. I really love that Mark Levine gets into contracts, because contracts are usually it's where things are going to get bad. It's where they're going to trick you into giving you rights or doing something that's not good. Chapter 7, analyzing the fine print of each publisher's contract and services. Once again, another chapter focused on that contract and their services. Then, starting in chapter 8, Mark Levine actually does a breakdown of some of the most popular POD companies. He breaks it down into, let me pull one up here. Okay, so Infinity Publishing. He gives you the website, he tells you the format of books, the genres accepted, publishing fees, tells you all their packages, other services of interest like photo scanning, copy editing, advanced reading copies, marketing packages, extended distribution package. Then he gets into return of digital cover and interior files. This is really interesting and something I never thought of until I read this book. Some of the POD companies will, whatever files they create to make your book, like the files that make it print ready, some of them say that that is their property and that you can't sell it or use it elsewhere, which would mean if you terminated your contract with them, you would have to recreate the files that are used to print your book. Now that's the purpose of the POD company, so it's reasonable for them to keep those rights. But if that's something that you're going to want to own, you're going to want to check that out. And this tells you some companies do and some companies don't. Retail price of author's book. Some companies say that they are going to make the decision about how much to charge, and some companies let you make the decision. Price author pays for books. This is how much you're going to pay to print each book when it's ordered. So it's going to be out of that total book price. How much are you paying to make the book? And yes, royalties paid to author. This is huge. This is like the thing that, you always want to compare and contrast. Okay, what am I going to make when I use these different POD companies? Not all the POD companies make it easy to figure that out. Mark Levine spells it out for you. He shows you what you will make when you make direct sales from the POD website, which is always more than sales from Amazon or a third-party retailer. See, a lot of these POD companies, they will also they'll sell your book on their website, and then they'll also sell your book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and even it'll put your book, make it available to like Ingram and the actual physical bookstore book retailers. It'll make it available to them. That doesn't say they're going to order them. But if you sell your book through any of those third-party things, which he calls indirect sales, you will always make less than if you sell it directly from the POD website. That's another thing that kind of sucks about POD. You will make less if people buy from the common places to buy, like Amazon. But it's available on Amazon, so that's a cool thing. So he breaks it down into how much you'll make directly and indirectly. And then he talks about notable provisions of the publishing agreement. So he breaks down the contract for you. Author-friendly rating. He tells you how friendly it is, because a lot of times these POD companies, some of them aren't friendly. Some of them have bad customer service, and the last thing you want is the people who have control of your book being jerks. So I think that's really important. So that's how he breaks it down for every single publishing POD popular ones, not all of them, but the popular ones. And you can compare and contrast these things, and you can make decisions about, well, you know what, the most important thing for me is royalties. So I want to see who I will make the most royalties from. And then I'll use that to narrow it down, and then I can look at everything else and see what else matters. That's how I did it, and I was able to narrow it down to my top POD company last night. And I was like, awesome! I've been trying to do this for months, and it's been really hard doing it online, and this book just made it so easy. So here are the companies that he actually compares, and he has categorized them to outstanding self-publishers, is Chapter 8. Chapter 11 is publishers to avoid. Oh, I skipped Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is publishers who are just okay. Chapter 11 is publishers to avoid. And Chapter 12 is the worst of the worst. So I don't want to get into trouble by saying which ones he says are which. So I'm just going to tell you in random order. You have to buy the book to find out who's the worst and who's the greatest, because I don't know what the legalities are of saying that. He figured it out. So okay, so I'm doing this randomly. These are some of the POD publishers that he compares. Arbor Books, Author House, Cross Books, Dorrance Publishing, iUniverse, Luminia Press, Publishing America, Trafford Publishing, Westbow Press, Xlibris. I'm not sure if I pronounced that one right. That's the one that's spelled Xlibris. Wine Press Publishing, Create Space, that's Amazon's POD, Outskirts Press, Lulu, Magic Valley Publishing, Word Clay, Aventine Press, Book Locker, Book Pros, Dog Ear Publishing, Infinity Publishing, Tate Publishing, Wasteland Press, and Zulon Press. Now remember, I didn't do those in order, so you can't be like, oh, he said this one's good and this one's bad. You're going to have to get the book to see that. But it literally shows you in the table of contents. And the conclusion, you found a publisher, now what? So this is an awesome book. This book helped me. I really think this book will help you. The fine print of self-publishing. The only thing that I found unfortunate about this book, and I'm sure the 5th edition will remedy that, is that it doesn't have a chapter on Abbott Books, which is the Writer's Digest POD. It's brand new, and I've heard some bad things, but it's brand new, so it's working at the kinks. So I don't know. The cool thing about Writer's Digest's POD is that Writer's Digest has created a seal of quality. So even though they'll print, it's a printer, so you're paying them to print, they're not judging who's good and who's not and accepting based on that. But Writer's Digest is a writing magazine about quality. So they've created a little symbol, a little seal to put on the best of the best. So if they get a book that is really awesome and they print it and they think it's really awesome, they'll put a seal on it. And that seal, right now, it doesn't mean very much to the public, but the hope is that in the future you can self-publish, and if you get that seal, you'll be like, yeah, see, Writer's Digest actually, vetted my book. So that's the cool thing about that. I want to read to you a couple of the blurbs that are on the back. You know me, I always like to read blurbs. Okay, this first one is on the front cover, and it says, Dan Pointner's The Self-Publishing Manual did this blurb. If you're considering paying a company to publish your book, don't do anything until you read the fine print and consider the alternatives. It will save you a lot of time, money, and heartache. Susan Daffron, President, Small Publishers, Artists, and Writers Network, says, book publishing can be a tough business. At Spawn, we always recommend that anyone even remotely considering using a self-publishing company read Mark Levine's book first. Mark has done an amazing amount of painstaking research going through contracts and running the numbers. If aspiring authors just spend a few bucks on the fine print of self-publishing, thousands of dollars and a whole lot of heartache could be avoided. Jan B. King, founder of E-Women Publishing Network, says, if you are even thinking about self-publishing, you must read this book. The mistakes you can avoid will set the stage for your ultimate book success. You can't afford not to buy this book. And finally, Perry Binder, Associate Professor of Legal Studies, Georgia State University, says, the fine print is a consumer-friendly guide to choosing your best self-publishing deal. Mark explains the industry's tricky contract language in such clear terms that any non-lawyer can understand and follow. Mark Levine is CEO of Hillcrest Media Group, Inc. in Minneapolis. Hillcrest provides book publishing, ebook design, printing, marketing, and website design and distribution services to authors and independent publishers. And the rest of his bio is skewed by this. That little barcode thing. Let me see if it's on the back. Or in the last covers. It does have an index. I hate it when these types of books don't have indexes. So anyways, this is the fine print of self-publishing. If you are considering a POD publisher and want to do research, but it's too daunting and difficult online, and I am the queen of online research, and I couldn't do it. So this guy did the work for you. You might as well check it out, get some insider knowledge, and make sure that if you decide to go with POD, you know what you're doing. So that's the fine print of self-publishing by Mark Levine. I highly recommend it. 2 thumbs up, 5 stars, etc., etc. So I hope this review helped you get some ideas about a good book to give you some information, and I hope you check out my other blogs and book reviews. Thanks again for watching.